Happy Monday, everyone. Okay. All right, we'll start off with a few remarks and look forward to your questions. So, let's see, last week, revenue forecast. What I want to say about that. So, this is the key economic forecast as legislators finalize the budget. For me, what I've been emphasizing to lawmakers is that we have to deal with the situation at hand right now. We're certainly all worried about potential federal cuts on the horizon, but with the forecast we have, let's continue to prioritize those things that we know we need to continue to invest in. Things that are in my budget, serving our folks who are unsheltered, making sure we're moving forward with housing production, making sure we're expanding access in behavioral health care for mental health and addiction treatment services, and continue to support our schools to be successful. That has not changed despite the forecast. And in fact, I would argue with a dampening in the economy that we saw from the forecast, we should do everything we can within the means that we have to continue to invest in our communities in one-time fashion that deals with the priorities for the state and also continues to support economic development in the state. So I'm going to continue to work with lawmakers. They have hard choices to make, but I'm going to continue to focus on the priorities so I can sign budgets that actually continue to move our state forward. So we'll continue to have conversations with the legislature about that. We're starting to see the point-in-time counts for folks experiencing homelessness start to come out. As you know, we don't have the federal count because the federal administration is delayed in combining all the counts that we're starting to see in the state. Portland's point-in-time count is out. Salem's point-in-time count is out. Here's what I'm seeing in both of theirs is that individuals and households experiencing homelessness is increasing. We are seeing a leveling off and decrease in those individuals and households experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And if you remember 2 years ago, when I declared the emergency, we were very much focused on unsheltered individuals. And we're making progress there. We're getting more folks off the streets into more stability, which will help them in their rehousing. And we still have an underlying problem that our housing is not, we don't have enough housing, and the housing we do have is not affordable for folks, and that's why you continue to see here in the state the numbers ticking up on overall homelessness. So I'm going to stay the course on production as well as serving folks who are outside. We're showing progress, but we have a long way to go here, and I think that's what those numbers are showing us. Last week and going into this week, obviously, we are watching one more thing about the point-in-time counts. One, I continue to emphasize that the city of Portland has a really great opportunity right in front of them right now to get 5,000 new homes in production with their system development charge waiver idea. And I would just urge the city council to get on that as soon as they possibly can. I think it sent a really strong signal to developers in Portland that the city is serious about getting more housing built, and they're just waiting for the ordinance to get passed by the city council. So hopefully they can move that quickly. All eyes are on what's happening in Congress around federal cuts. I spoke last week and want to reiterate today again around the food benefit programs, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. The reductions that are being proposed in Congress under the Trump administration's attempt to pay for a very, very large tax cut. Those SNAP cuts are going to take food away from people who need it. There is no way for the state to backfill the SNAP cuts that are being recommended. Right now, the federal government, because they can deficit spend, they pay for 100% of the food benefits that go to Oregonians here in the state. More than 750,000 Oregonians who receive SNAP benefits. By shifting that back to the states, there's no way for us to pick up the tab for that. And their idea that they're going to ask us to pay for more of the administrative costs is also very complicated. It's a very complicated program to begin with. I worked at Oregon Food Bank. I saw what it meant when kids couldn't be fed. Parents should not have to make the choice not to be able to feed their child. These SNAP cuts are going to be devastating for people across the country, not only here in Oregon, but across the country. Same thing with the Medicaid situation. The cuts that are being considered for Medicaid here in Oregon, that's the Oregon Health Plan. We have 1.4 million Oregonians who receive their health insurance through the Oregon Health Plan. the care that they need to stay healthy. Because we have emphasized access here and providing insurance, we have been able to maintain our rural hospitals and our provider networks because we actually have shared the responsibility and the cost across the whole system by able to have the Oregon Health Plan be so robust. 1 out of every 2 kids is on the Oregon Health Plan. If you're in Eastern Oregon, 70% of the children in Eastern Oregon are on the Oregon Health Plan. The cuts that they're suggesting are, I think, morally reprehensible, and we have to continue to push back at all costs. So both the SNAP and Medicaid cuts are very serious, and frankly, I'm not very happy right now where the bills are headed. So hopefully Congress will come to some senses in the Senate, but it's going to be really devastating for Oregon. Gonna maybe have a little good news here, if we can have a little good news. We are seeing that, I'm going to switch to deaths, and the numbers we're seeing on overdose deaths. Overdose deaths are down in Oregon. They're also down across the country. And I want to just highlight that. Look, any death from overdose is not okay. We want to be at 0. But our numbers have been very high. And I think we've been doing some very specific things to see them come down. And I just want to highlight those. So we've seen a 22% decrease between December of 23 and December of 24 in the number of overdose deaths. I was just in Portland last week celebrating the start of the new 72 beds that Central City Concern is standing up. We are doing more to provide services for folks. We have expanded the Save Lives Oregon Harm Reduction Clearinghouse. When that got started, you'll had about 6 agencies accessing the price-reduced supplies that they need in their communities. We now have 380 agencies across the state who work with the clearinghouse. We've continued to expand access to opioid treatment programs. There are now 27 full-service opioid treatment programs in Oregon. There are 2 opioid treatment program medication units and 4 mobile units. So we are bringing access to the communities where they are, and I think that's helping us to reduce deaths. And then ultimately it's about helping people get better. So we've increased residential capacity across the state. We currently have 260 beds dedicated to substance use disorder treatment that are in development on top of the existing capacity, and 41 new beds dedicated to withdrawal management are in development. So again, if we have a place for people to go, first we want to keep people alive, and then they need a place to go when they're ready for treatment, and we're making progress there. And we can get you those specific numbers if you want more detail. And then lastly, there's a lot going on across the street with legislation. I want to focus on one bill, the bill to ban cell phone use in schools. When I think about what we want to achieve this session legislatively for youth mental health, the cell phone bill is on that list. From bell to bell, we need to keep cell phones away so kids can focus in the classroom, be more supported, be more connected. It's good for their well-being. The research is clear. And I really urge legislators to get that done. I think it's a really good bill. And it's going to be good for our kids and youth. So I'm happy to see that that's progressing. It might be stalled at the moment, so I just want to say please get that done. I think it's super important. So with that, happy to take some questions. Go ahead, Jake.
Thanks. Hi, Governor. You said read the budget forecast or the revenue forecast. It is important that we keep investing these things within our means. And so to me, there was a suggestion that the initial numbers you put forward in those 3 packages may be reduced now that we have a smaller window of opportunity or less funding. Where is that? Are you still adamant that the legislature can pay for all the things you asked for in your recommended budget, or are you slimming down those asks now that you've seen what the revenue will be?
I think it would be very difficult for the legislature to fund everything that's in my budget. So I want to continue to work with them and say, how do we scale those to get to maybe a different number? For me, I've been trying to stay connected, particularly on housing and homelessness. We made commitments to maintain services for unhoused individuals. We need to stay the course with our local governments, and we need to stay focused on housing production. Now, I put a lot of things in my budget that I think really round out what we're trying to do and actually help us solve the problem quicker. We might not be able to do all of that right now, but we still have to substantially invest. Same with behavioral health, same with our schools. So my message to lawmakers is, let's work on this together. I know you can't do everything in my budget, but the priorities have not changed. And I would argue they're going to have to make hard choices to find other resources to get to funding those priorities at the highest level they possibly can.
Well, and just a quick follow-up. I mean, if this is less than what you asked for the money for a reason, so what do you see potentially falling by the wayside because there's less now? You're saying you can't afford it all.
Well, my assumption is our co-chairs are closely looking at what do each of the agencies need to continue to function and function well. So they'll look at administrative reductions first. I think that we need to make sure we don't dig too deep into our agencies because then they can't do their work. So that is, I think, problem number one. But it really is, I don't know what the legislators are considering at this point. It can't just be cuts. Reprioritization is important. And I'm hoping they're going to say, well, if we're going to need this for housing or behavioral health or schools, we might have to do this thing differently. I'm encouraging them to be creative, and they only have a few weeks left, so I know that's where their heads are.
Thank you.
Virtual question. First one comes from Colton Weekly at KGW. Governor Kotek, Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson changed the county policy to allow tents and tarps to be handed out by the county during severe weather rather than making them available year-round. Do you agree with her limiting tent and tarp distribution?
I do, because I think we've seen increases in shelter capacity and options for people that would not require that kind of distribution. So I think they're making the right choice right now.
Go ahead. Speaking of limited time and resources, I get the impression that things are moving slower than anticipated, especially in the Senate, and there's a possibility that Senate Republicans will ask for third readings on bills. What are you hearing vis-a-vis this, and I guess what would your reaction be if that is the case?
Well, I think on the slowdowns that folks in the minority can take advantage of, I think that's the usual kind of horse trading you see in the session. I don't think there's anything unusual there. And it does require constant communication between the leadership and the Republican leadership to say, hey, we need to figure these things out. I don't think that's unusual.
I'm getting the impression that there's concern that certain bills will have to be deprioritized if the Senate takes their time getting there.
Well, I would argue that both chambers need to get everything done, and they might just have to stay really, really long hours.
All right, Lucas.
Next virtual question comes from Noticias Northwest. The legislators just passed Senate Bill 599, which bars discrimination, housing discrimination. When will you sign this bill into law?
Here in the session, by the time it passes the floors, it might be another week or so. So we'll look at the bill. Certainly want to make sure people have access to housing, and I think it had bipartisan support. So I look forward to seeing it.
On Friday, we got another progress report from the OIA on the improvements to their professional standards office. The agency safety task force also met for the first time. What did you think of that meeting, and what do you think? Are you pleased with the progress they've made so far?
I think it was a good first meeting. That oversight group to talk about improvements in OIA, I think, has a good membership on it. I'm pleased that we have a person in my office who can take feedback from youth and families who might be having concerns about the Oregon Youth Authority. I feel like we are putting some really good structures in place to have the right conversations, and so I think we're off to a good start.
Next virtual question comes from Nigel at the Oregon Journalism Project. Two-part question. So last week, Governor Gavin Newsom proposed scaling back free healthcare for undocumented immigrants and beginning to charge them $100 per month in 2027. Two-part question, what is the governor's reaction to Governor Newsom's proposal? And then, given pressure on Medicaid funding, can Governor Kotek envision making a similar proposal in Oregon?
Well, I know California has a very significant budget situation. So they're going to have to make some hard choices down there. And we're taking a wait-and-see approach in terms of what that would mean from what the federal government is asking us to do. Our goal has been to make sure that folks have access to health insurance. That supports everyone. Now, let me just give you a little bit of an anecdote. When someone doesn't have health insurance, they're going to still seek care, oftentimes in the emergency department, which is more expensive. Those costs are either borne by the hospital or borne by other folks who have private pay insurance, either through their employer or insurance that they purchase elsewhere. The cost will go somewhere. When everybody is insured, it is much more helpful to keep costs down and reasonable for everyone. And so that's why we've taken an approach to get as much care to everyone so the system can be more balanced.
Jeff?
Hi, Governor. We're now 4 months into the session. You know, you see the deadline coming up. You've signed a number of bills. I have no idea how many, dozens or maybe hundreds. What have been the biggest wins of the session in your mind? And, you know, what can you tell Oregonians? You know, we've been here for 4 months. Well, not you, lawmakers have been here for 4 months.
I never leave. So.
How, like, what would you tell them? Like, this is what we have done to improve your lives.
Well, I think the biggest bill so far for the session for me is the signing of the summer bills, the two bills, one with money and one with the programming for summer learning for this summer and the next 2 summers. That was a huge win for all of Oregon, so obviously we had a signing on that really big bill. What I'm seeing in the bills that I have been signing that have been coming over both from the House and Senate are bills that do small things that are really important to Oregonians across the state. I'm trying to think of the one that I just signed today. There were some bills about how do we make it easier for community banks to be able to, you know, do their business in the state. That might not sound very interesting, but our community banks are really helpful to communities around the state. So I can get you a little bit more of the anecdotes, but these are small bills that matter to Oregonians. They don't just come out of thin air. They come from Oregonians who care about making things better, and we'll get you a list because they're on the small side because that's where we are in the session. But I would say the summer learning bill is the big bill so far in the session.
Do you have a virtual one?
Yeah, we've got a long-winded one. Bear with me. This one comes from Dick Hughes. Other reporters and I have been trying to gain a greater understanding of how Governor Kotek is interacting with the legislature. I've gone through her 3 most recent weekly calendars. The latest one posted online is May 4th. I might have missed something, but here's what I saw. Weekly meetings with Senator Lieber and Taylor, a meeting with Rep. Neron, a meeting with presiding officers, a reception at Niagara Hall. Those, of course, were before last week's forecast came out. Can you provide some specifics of what the governor is doing to encourage, control, lobby, inspire legislators regarding specific legislation? And what was the subject of the meetings with Senators Lieber and Taylor?
I'm so glad people, thank you, Dick, for looking at my calendar. So here's what I would say about the way I've been tracking things in the session. I rely a lot on my policy advisors who are having regular conversations with legislators. So when you see things on my calendar working on our education initiative, our behavioral health initiative, or housing and homelessness, they often revolve around conversations with staff about legislation. So I think the message I would send is I'm paying very close attention, mostly with conversations with my staff. Now, I do have occasional conversations directly with legislators. Often those are personal. I served in the legislature, having a lunch with a member or having a phone call about something. That is my way of, answering questions they might have of me, more than anything specific around legislation. But I am going to be picking up the pace. Memorial Day is next week. June is here. The session's coming to a close. I had a meeting at 8:30 this morning with the co-chairs of Ways and Means to talk about my budget and where they are going in terms of making final decisions. So, Dick, you might see a few more things on my calendar because I'm trying to make sure we can get the session done in the best interest of Oregon.
Yes, over.
Governor, as you mentioned, the session is coming to an end very quickly, and so I'm curious if you have any concerns that the public is not maybe going to have a full chance to weigh on some of these major things coming up, like the transportation package.
I do think that there will be a lot of transparency, even though it might, I do think virtual meetings have allowed a lot more participation, but on transportation there have been a lot of conversations leading up to this point. And at some point, members of the legislature are going to have to make some decisions, but they will also be heard in committee. There will be discussions about those things. Same with the budget. If you think about the hundreds of bills that are in Ways and Means right now that potentially could have budget allocations, they've all had hearings. They've all had public hearings. They've had work sessions. So I do think there has been strong public participation so far this year. And things will move quickly at the end of the year, but I think legislators have a pretty good idea what people think about these things, and they just, they're just finalizing details at this point over the next few weeks. Dick, I forgot to mention that I continue to meet regularly with the House Republican leader, the Senate Republican leader, and the presiding officers on a regular basis, so it's not like we don't talk. So.
Any virtuals?
In the room.
All right.
A quick follow-up on the Healthier Oregon Medicaid stuff, Governor, because, you mentioned California is in a dire budget situation, but I think we would certainly be in a dire budget situation too if the penalties for covering undocumented people were, I think, billions of dollars over the course of the decade, right? Probably money that, as you would argue, we can't backfill. So when you talk to lawmakers about this, they say if that went through, we'd probably have to cut that program. Are you're not sort of willing to grapple with that possible reality yet?
I think we have to wait and see what Congress does. One of the things that I've been urging folks is we cannot overreact or predict what's going to happen. We need to be aware that things could happen, but until something gets passed by Congress, I really can't have, I think, a concrete conversation with lawmakers of how we're going to handle that. I would also question whether it is lawful to predicate one stream of funding on something the state is doing all by itself. Those are two different things, and I don't think we have an answer on that.
And then very quickly, I'm sorry, my colleague will be mad at me for ask you, is $5 million for Portland Shelter, and maybe there's more state money they're asking for, but Mayor Wilson is really counting on some state money to bolster his plan. Is that still part of the money that you will be arguing strongly for from the legislature?
I think the mayor, excuse me, the mayor has some money in his budget that he and I have talked about. I'm hoping we will have some dollars to get to him before the end of the biennium, but that is not his only ask. The city and county have come in and asked for $25 million to meet their budgetary needs. That is a separate ask, but I think the $5 million he's holding in his budget is something we'll probably be able to do before end of session.
All right, Alex, last question.
5-part question. I guess you've laid out your priorities that are non-negotiable: housing, addiction, education. You're obviously streaming into the end of this, needing to figure out money. You're talking with the powers that be. Is there anything that comes to mind? I guess when you look at the sort of strategy here, is it going to be piecemeal, taking small things? I mean, Ways and Means is full of study bills right now. Writ large, cut study bills that require money. Is there any strategy that's more broadly like go for the sort of big ticket items? If you can give people any sense of like, you're not going to be able to do this entirely through like agency administrative cuts, and you don't want to cut these agencies down to the bone. Is there any indication you can give to the public about what might not make it?
Well, I would go back to the principles of the budget that I designed, which was, with working with our agencies, what do you need to do the basic service to Oregonians today? We built agency budgets, not with a bunch of new things. We said, let's continue to do the work. And there were very, very, very few new things in my budget. I suspect that we'll see a lot of agency budgets that are very much aligned with what I put in the GRB. Here's a message for lawmakers, though. We are not in the same situation that we have been in the last couple biennium, where there was a lot of money at the end of session. There are too many bills in session. Not all of them are important to moving our priorities forward. I have no hesitation to veto bills that do not move us forward. And I need to see budget bills that are actually prioritizing the things that matter to Oregonians. And my message is, send me good budgets, I would like to sign them. But don't send me things we don't need. And people need to be more thrifty in their asks, or maybe they should just stop asking. And let's focus on the priorities of the state.
Okay, this is my last one though. The legislature, statutorily allowed to take the kicker. Or rather, excuse me, I've got this as state constitution allows the legislative assembly by a 2/3 majority to take the kicker, put it into, I guess, is there any conversation about using the kicker this year to do this?
So as right now, under the forecast, we're looking at close to $2 billion going out in tax relief next year for the kicker. The only conversation that I'm entertaining, the only conversation I'm hearing about, is to use a portion of that money on a one-time basis to fund wildfire suppression and mitigation. I think that's the right conversation to be having, and I would urge legislators to continue with that.
I do want to make sure you get your question in. So that actually is last.
Well, and right as you brought that up, perfect timing, I wanted to ask, given early concerns regarding wildfire concerns around the state, what steps are you taking now to help ensure preparedness at agencies across the state?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, we're getting ready for wildfire season, and all the collaboration and preparedness that we would normally do is happening. And it is one of those items that I've been pushing with legislative leadership to not leave the session without it, which is dedicated funding for suppression of wildfire, fight the fires, and also protect communities to be more ready for fire. We need to find some resources to do that, and I do think this conversation on a one-time basis of supporting rural Oregon by potentially using a portion of the Kicker tax break would be a beneficial approach.
What portion are you thinking of, Governor? I've only heard the 1 point, I mean, Golden's only talking about the full thing. I've not heard a smaller amount. So
Look,
what
if
would
you
be
take $1
acceptable?
billion and dedicate to suppression and mitigation, that would be very helpful for the state. And most of the folks who are going to be paying that are folks who do not live in fire-prone areas.
All right,
First
Governor's got
time
a
I
heart
think
out.
I've heard you
Got it?
argue for
Thank you.
that, actually.
Yeah,
Thanks,
me too.
everybody. Good to see you.